Seeing that there are none at this time, we'll go out for public discussion. Is there someone from the public that would like to speak on this item?
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. Bob Weeks, 2451 Regency Lakes Court. I spent quite a bit of time reading those reports, and there is one piece of good news. Thank God our plans are not in the same shape that CAPERS, the Kansas Public Employee Retirement System, is. That system is in dire straits, and as we know, the legislature is struggling on how to make that work. But still, we're having in Wichita to make higher contributions to keep the plan funded, and as we see in some of the projections, these contribution rates and funding ratios are likely to get worse because I think that this plan fundamentally relies on two unrealistic assumptions. I would point out that in 2 years, the amount of money the city has had to contribute to the employees fund, not the police and fire fund, has increased by 98%, nearly doubled. And when the gentleman said he's asking you to increase your contribution rate this year from roughly 10% to 12%, he said that's 2 percentage points. That's true, but it's 20% more money that we're having to contribute this year, at least for that one fund. And also we have to remember in these reports, when we talk about employer contributions, remember that the employer here who has to pay for these contributions are the city of Wichita taxpayers. So that's important to remember as well. But I think that one of the big problems we have is that our Wichita retirement plan uses an assumed rate of return of 7.75%. And that's actually a fairly common rate for state and local governments to use. CAPERS, for example, uses 8%. But this rate is simply too high. In the private sector, most pension plans have to use much lower assumed rates of return, such as the rate of return on high quality corporate bonds. Right now that's around 5%. Even if we were to say let's use 6% as an assumed rate of return, I'm sure that the actuaries can tell you that that would cause our unfunded ratio to decline dramatically and the contributions would need to explode, perhaps by as much as 1/3. But really I think that 5 to 6% rate of return is what many experts are saying. This is what the future looks like. These 8, 9, 10% rates of return that used to be commonplace, I think, between President Bush and President Obama, those days are long gone. So because we operate under these unrealistic assumptions, I think we're taking on too much risk and too much debt in the form of future promised benefits that the city isn't presently paying for. The solution here is to do what the private sector has done. Abandon these defined benefit plans, which is what we have in Wichita. Move to a defined contribution plan like 401k and the variants, which is what almost all of the private sector uses. Now the city has done this partially because the new employees, not the police and fire, but the other employees, are initially in a defined contribution plan. But then after 7 years, employees can decide to move to a defined benefit plan, the type we're having trouble with, or stay in a defined contribution plan. As it turns out, I've learned that almost all eligible Wichita employees choose to enter the defined benefit plan at that 7-year decision point. So I can understand that current employees with less than 7 years service have the expectation that they'll be able to select the defined benefit plan at some time in the future. But I think the reality we have to face is that we simply cannot afford the defined benefit plans here in the city of Wichita unless we are willing to raise taxes substantially or to cut services dramatically. I realize that employees have certain expectations, but also taxpayers do too. I mean, it's one thing if we were fully funding these plans under realistic assumptions, we would know what we're spending, but we're not doing that now. Our assumptions are not realistic, and therefore we're just pushing off debt and higher taxes to future generations. The new employees who have not yet been hired in the city of Wichita, they have no expectations as to what type of retirement plan they're going to be in. So for these people, we certainly need to put them in a defined contribution plan and abandon the defined benefit plan that we have. We do have to balance the expectations of these employees with the interests of taxpayers. I would also ask this question of the city because I've heard that this may be the case, and it's certainly argued with regard to CAPERS. Do we find that the contributions from new employees are necessary to fund the benefits for retired employees? Again, that's an argument made with regard to CAPERS, that we can't abandon the defined benefit plan at CAPERS because the new employees have to pay for the existing people. If that is true, this is an admission that the contributions of the young workers, the new workers, are used to fund the benefits of retirees along the lines of a Ponzi scheme. Instead of new members' contributions being invested to provide for their own retirement, their contributions are needed to pay for current retirees. If this is the case in Wichita, then we have a system that guarantees being perpetually underfunded, one that will be very difficult to extract ourselves from, just like the state is finding with the CAPERS defined benefit plan. Those are my remarks, and I'd be certainly happy to answer questions.
Questions?